Good evening and welcome to the July 26th meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education. The board started the meeting at 4 p.m. with a work session on the Say Yes to Education initiative. Very, I'd say, enticing and compelling possibility of bringing some outside expertise and dollars to our community to help coordinate wraparound services and build potentially a very large endowment for paying for college for qualified JCPS graduates, which is very interesting. We then had a work session on the Code of Acceptable Behavior and Discipline, which will come up for a vote shortly here. And then a few minutes ago, we had a brief District Finance Corporation meeting. No action was taken at the first two, and we did approve a Finance Corporation matter in the latter. The board is going to conduct a closed session of this meeting at 8 p.m. I'm going to go ahead and, well, when we get to 8 p.m., I will read the appropriate language to break for that. So that's a slight change in the agenda. At this point, please join us for our traditional moment of silence. Sorry. Testing, testing. All right, let me repeat. A slight change to the agenda. We're going to have a closed session, an executive session, instead of at the end of tonight's regular meeting at 8 p.m. or as close to that as fits the flow. So at this point, please join us for our traditional moment of silence. Thank you. Now let us all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Vice Chair Porter will now read our vision statement.
All Jefferson County Public School students graduate prepared, empowered, and inspired to reach their full potential and contribute as thoughtful, responsible citizens of our diverse, shared world.
Thank you, Ms. Porter. It's now my pleasure to introduce Ms. Terry Robinson to lead us in our recognitions and resolutions.
Thank you, Dr. Hargens, Board Chair David Jones Jr., and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education. Tonight, we are very proud to recognize Dr. Thomas Aberle for being selected as the 2016 Kentucky Administrator of the Year. He was selected for his outstanding educational contributions in Kentucky's public schools through his exceptional leadership and service. Dr. Aberle serves on the Principals Advisory Committee to the Commissioner of Education and was selected to serve on both the state's Youth Bullying Prevention Task Force and the State School Curriculum Assessment and Accountability Council. He was also elected to the CASA Board of Directors. Board Chair David Jones Jr. and Assistant Superintendent Michelle Dillard, please come forward to congratulate Dr. Aberle. Dr. Hargens and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education, this concludes our recognitions for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. That was short but very sweet. Okay, I think this is the point where ordinarily we invite students and everybody else who would like to leave, but I suspect that this is the last time for a while where nobody will want to take advantage of that opportunity. So we'll do that. Oh, sorry about that. Yes, is there a motion to accept the recognition? Moved by Ms. Porter, seconded by Ms. Horn. All in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. All right. Next, we come to approval of the meeting agenda. As I mentioned, the order of the agenda is slightly changed, although the same items are on there. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Mr. Hadaway moves, Ms. Horn seconds. All in favor? That passes unanimously. Next, we come to the minutes of the previous meetings. We have previously received minutes from the June 28th regular meeting and the July 12th special meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Okay, Mr. Hadaway moves, Ms. Porter seconds. All in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And now, Dr. Hargens, we come to you for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Chair Jones and members of the board, for this opportunity to present the superintendent's report. We now have 14 days before the 16-17 first day of school on Wednesday, August 10th. So it really is the countdown to the first day of school. So the administrative leadership kickoff will be held tomorrow, and it really is about getting ready for what happens, and we do that all summer long. We're proud to say that Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, who is a JCPS alum, a Valley Viking, will be the keynote speaker at the administrative kickoff. We know that Dr. Goldsmith is a world-renowned, best-selling author, and strategy 2.2.4 is to develop leaders. But again, he's JCPS, so we're proud that he's going to present to us tomorrow. In support of Vision 2020, the strategic plan, a deeper learning convening was held on July 13th, where over 70 JCPS leaders, including principals, teachers, and district administrators, convened to discuss the implications of the deeper learning framework approved by the board in June. And you can see that on the screen. Participants discussed substantive issues, the kinds of learning relationships, environments, and experiences that are really needed to develop deeper learning capacities and dispositions, how to move forward in creating the system needed to support deeper learning. Participants engaged in rich discussions, and the input and ideas from this session will be used in developing implementation plans, stakeholder involvement, and communications plan. The second meeting of the Commissioners' Stephen Pruitt's Accountability Steering Committee took place in Frankfurt yesterday. Former KDE Assessment and Accountability Associate Commissioner Brian Gong, who is now with the Center for Assessment, addressed the group on some important issues with the ESSA law and proposed regulations. A formal comment regarding the proposed regulations can be submitted to the Office of the Federal Register before August 1st. Vision 2020's goal is increasing capacity. This summer, our records show that during June and July alone, 905 professional development sessions were offered with 7,961 certified participants. An example, to date, we have 358 district staff trained in youth mental health first aid, and additional trainings will be offered in the fall. Administrators are involved in the rigorous, research-based National Institute of School Leadership we call NISL training. We have 56 administrators who are already trained, and we're adding 66 more to this elite group. The 15th District PTA Clothing Assistance Program Annual Blitz Week is being held this week through Saturday at the 15th District PTA office from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. This program is part of the infrastructure that we've built to address supporting our students and families. Another part of the infrastructure is Louisville Linked. The goal of Louisville Linked is to link our arms around our students, ensuring that they get what they need to be successful. During the 15-16 school year, 31,681 JCPS students were linked with a resource, and 37%, or 11,879 of these students, were linked who needed two or more resources. Also on the consent agenda, and I know we're going to talk about it, we're asking for approval of 6 changes. It does not include the approval of an exit process or criteria. That is being worked on by the Magnet Steering Review Committee in regard to all magnet programs, which include traditional programs. So a recommendation about the exit process will be brought to the board on September 27th, and that date, you'll note, has been added to the planning calendar. I would be remiss, or we would be remiss, if we didn't recognize someone who has been really, really important and instrumental in moving JCPS forward. I'd like to end by acknowledging Area Superintendent Amy Dennis and congratulating her on her August 1st retirement. Congratulations, Amy. Chair Jones, I'm recommending for approval the consent agenda later in the meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Hargens. We will now move into our first action item, which is the recommendation to accept the 2015-16 internal audit results and to approve the 2016-17 internal audit risk-based plan. Dr. Hargens, would you like to introduce this item?
Absolutely. We're pleased to have with us Jim Tenza, who is our lead auditor. He leads the independent third-party review. Our internal audit is a combination of experts from Dean Dorton, but also internal people, and Mr. Tenza leads them. So, Mr. Tenza.
Thank you. Chair Jones, board members, and Dr. Hargens, in accordance with our internal audit charter and professional standards of the Institute of Internal Auditors, we have provided a summary of the internal audit department's work for the past year. That's the year ended June 30, 2016, and our plan for the current year, July 1, 2016 through June 30, 2017. So we provide this information earlier, and first of all, when looking back at the past year, it's good to see all of the changes the internal audit department's gone through. We've had 2 experienced JCPS employees retire, one right before the year started and one in the fall. We hired 2 new employees in November, and this was really the first full year that Dean Dorton was involved in the internal audit, and it was the first year of really doing a risk-based audit plan. And I believe we really have a great team. The 3 JCPS employees, Lily Mae Perry, has a lot of experience with internal audit, has been with the district for a while. The 2 new internal auditors, Greg Crump, is certified internal auditor and certified forensic examiner, and then Sonia Miller is a former bookkeeper, so she has a lot of knowledge of what goes on at the schools with the bookkeepers. Those, along with the resources of Dean Dorton, really puts us to what is really best practice for internal audit departments. So anyway, in the summary that we've provided, with all those changes going on, we still did almost 270 audits in the past year, and we provided a summary, a very high-level summary of the audits that we did in accordance with the plan. And just a couple things I want to point out. One is there were just a couple variances from the plan. We had planned to do an audit of the financial reporting, which was really looking at the annual close process last year, and we bypassed that because of the new accounting software that was put in place at all the schools for the bookkeepers, and we needed to focus in on that instead of the financial reporting, and the financial reporting is audited by external auditors anyway, so that was lower risk. And then the only other change that we made to the plan was for the lunchroom audits, we were planning on doing audits of all the lunchroom activities for 133 lunchrooms. We did 74, and based on the results of that and based on the risk, we felt that that was adequate, so we stopped there. In the spreadsheet that you were provided, we color-coded. There's a few that are highlighted in yellow, which means that there were some more significant findings, and then there was a one highlighted in red that we thought was more serious. And so those relate to the scheduled audits. And then in a separate spreadsheet, we summarize all the special audits that we did. In accordance with our plan, we've allocated some time to do what we call special audits. Those might be things that come in through the hotline, or maybe special requests from principals or management to look at some areas because there's some concerns. And similarly, we've color-coded those, again, yellow meaning more significant, red meaning what we would consider to be serious. Those special audits have more yellows and reds because those are really tips that were given to us, or there's known problems there, so you would expect there to be more significant or serious findings. And in our summary, an executive summary, we tried to highlight what we thought were the key findings related to those. And probably, or not probably, the most significant one related to the student behavior data reporting, as you're all well aware. Besides the audits that we do, we also oversee the fraud hotline. And on the hotline, during the year, there were 33 matters that came through the hotline, plus we added into student bullying into the hotline in January, and there were 147 matters that came through as related to student bullying. So we oversee all of those to make sure that they're all resolved in a timely and appropriate manner, and they all were. There was nothing to report there of any significance that the board needs to be aware of. Just, I wanted to make you aware that they all were handled timely and appropriately and efficiently. And then in addition to those, we also do what we call consulting engagements. Occasionally, management may want help or insight on certain matters, so we will look at those but not necessarily issue a report. So I'm going to pause there before I go into the plan to ask for any questions on any of those reports or any of our findings, or any questions you may have.
So questions about the academic year just concluded. Linda?
I'm not positive where this was, but I saw in there a recommendation concerning centralizing bookkeeper work in some way, and I wish you would explain that, what you meant by that.
Yeah, yes. A significant amount of the audits that we do are going out to the schools and auditing the bookkeeping that's being done. And right now, every school essentially has a separate bookkeeper, and there's a lot of turnover in that position. Typically, it's the principal that's hiring that position. And so some of the people that are hired may not, from an accounting standpoint, may not be the best fit, so there's a fair amount of turnover. We spend a bunch of time training them, retraining them, rehiring, and then when we go in there to do audits, we have findings, and we would suggest that really, the bookkeeper should really be more under the control of the accounting department for the school district. We think we would have a better applicants and better bookkeepers if the accounting department oversaw that and they reported to the accounting department. We think there's also an opportunity. Some of the schools maybe don't need a full-time bookkeeper. Our experience is that some of the bookkeepers may be doing other non-bookkeeping stuff. Usually when you're at the school and employed there, you get caught up in supervising students or doing other stuff outside of the bookkeeping. So we think there's an opportunity to maybe control that a little bit better, maybe centralize it. Maybe there could be one bookkeeper that does a couple schools, and then them reporting to accounting, I think, would help minimize the amount of training and that's needed. So there's a lot of cost and effort that goes into that, and I think there's an opportunity to maybe centralize that to some degree.
And I guess that recommendation would come to Dr. Hargens, and then Dr. Hargens would consider that, I imagine, has that been an issue that you've talked over with principals or had any discussions about?
That's a recommendation from Dean Dorton. It would need to be reviewed, and then, of course, it would be a recommendation to the board and for approval or change of job descriptions or reporting structures or whatever the...
That report went to Tom Hudson and Cordelia, and they're reviewing that, considering that. There's several different ways to do that. There's a thought to maybe have kind of a centralized business manager that can oversee the bookkeepers, or maybe there's some bookkeepers that can be brought here. So I think they're looking at, what would be the most appropriate way to do that.
I thought that was a very interesting suggestion, and hope that we give that some thought. Thank you very much for that.
Lisa?
So with the fraud hotline and adding bullying to that, did you feel that that was a good move, and was that beneficial for the system to add that?
I think it was excellent. I think I think the state auditor actually had a recommendation to centralize it. A lot of the schools had separate hotlines to call. Having a central location makes it easier for people to report matters. And the bullying prevention team did an excellent job of reviewing those and investigating those and resolving those in a timely manner.
Do you think that there are other types of, other types of issues that might be added to the hotline in the future? Is there any thought about that?
I think right now trying to keep it to the fraud and the bullying makes the most sense. I know there was other matters that were considered, but I think those are the most common, where people might want to report things anonymously, and I think that's a good avenue to do that.
And then I also just wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about the recommendation or to consider ethics training and what that would look like in a school district, and just to flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of organizations have some sort of required ethics training where and it's difficult. The difficulty here is we have a lot of employees and a lot of different types of employees too, from teachers, administrators to maintenance people and things like that. So there's some difficulties in that. But essentially there's companies that provide an annual webinar where you can tweak it so that it fits your needs. We can have in there, here's the key policies we want to make sure everyone's aware of when we talk about our ethics and responsibilities. Here are the key things that we want to make sure everyone at JCPS is aware of. So it's a good way to make sure everyone's aware of the key matters, and also can point them to specific policies and procedures as it relates to ethics and fraud-related matters. And if you do that, the key is to make sure, if you want to require everyone to obtain that training, the cost of doing that has to be considered. And so we provided some different possible ways to do that, whether maybe it's roll it out over a few years, make sure we do teachers this year, others the next year. And there's different ways to do that, but we provided some recommendations, and it's becomes difficult with the number of employees and considering the cost.
Chris?
In relation to Member Duncan's point about, and within your executive summary regarding school bookkeepers, your summary of key findings, I understand and appreciate the recommendation of trying to streamline this and make things a bit more efficient, and also having some more stability regarding the personnel who are going to be reviewing or auditing these types of accounting duties, and also having qualified people doing it. My concern with the recommendation here is that it calls for outsourcing that, and I think that there is enough internal talent within JCPS. Then there are some really good, capable, and competent bookkeepers that are at some of our schools. That is something I'd like to, point out that we look internally first to be able to fill those positions rather than looking at outsourcing. That way we're supporting our personnel, and we're also taking advantage of the institutional knowledge that our existing employees have regarding our district.
Yeah, and I just want to point out that is one of the options. One of the options could be some sort of outsource arrangement or co-source arrangement. Obviously, keeping it all in-house is also an option. And either way, somehow better centralizing that and having them report directly to accounting is really the key point to that.
Totally understand that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Steph?
On number 12, on Exhibit 2, what's the financial reporting, can you give us more information about how the uniform procedures outlined in internal audit? What was that about?
This was in our original plan last year. We were planning on doing an audit of the financial reporting, so that was built into our plan. And as we started to work on the plan, what we were going to do is look at the year-end reporting, and just because of the limited resources that we had in internal audit, and because of the new accounting software that was rolled out to the bookkeepers, we had to spend more time there. And so internal audit, basically, we decided that it was, from a risk-based standpoint, it was better for us to spend our time there than to audit the financial reporting. So we basically deviated from the plan. And according to our charter, if there's any significant deviations, we're to report that to the board. And actually, back in December, we did say that our plan was to try to do something else related to financial reporting, but with the new accounting software for the bookkeepers and with the student behavior data reporting, we thought those were of higher risk, so we did not do that audit. So I'm just pointing that out to them.
So you're going to get back to it in a year from now? Is that when you're going to get back?
That's correct. That's correct. We're going to.
Do you need to do it sooner, or
Well,
do it sooner? Why are you waiting another year?
Well, because again, as we look at every year, as we look at the risk related to the district, and as we gain a little bit more knowledge, I just think there's less risk there. We have outside auditors, Strothman and Company, that's in auditing the financial reporting. Financial reporting is always going to be a higher risk for any organization because that's where all the numbers are accumulated, so you want to make sure they're right. But from an internal audit standpoint, again, because other parties are already looking at that, we think that's less risk. And so we want to focus on more high-risk areas.
And then one of the main issues that came out in the recent behavior audit was the duplicative systems. And I think at that time we said that we were going to be trying to make sure that we didn't have duplicative systems in other areas within JCPS. How are we, maybe in there, but how are we aligned to audit that specifically? Because I think we said we were going to.
That's a good question. We do have in our plan for the upcoming year, we are going to look at other student behavior reporting besides, we focus specifically on seclusions and restraints this past year. So we're going to look at some of the bus referrals, suspensions, other student behavior type reporting to make sure we understand how that information is being captured and whether it's being reported properly. And from a financial reporting standpoint, we will look at the systems, the IT systems, to see if there are some duplicative processes or systems. But right now, we're not, other than the student behavior type reporting, that's where we're going to focus right now. I'm not sure if we know where there's other duplicative reporting.
Let's finish up on the past year.
Because that's really a concern that JCPS was as called out by Kentucky Department of Education for having systems, redundant systems that were JCPS created. And I think that we have them in different areas other than behavior. We hadn't used, maybe, we're using Munis, or are we using our own system? I'm really concerned that that's not being audited when we have a data integrity issue.
Okay, let's come back to that when we get to the next year. Does anybody else have a question about the year concluded? Okay, I have a couple. The first is with respect to the issues that are coded in red on the two spreadsheets. What is the process for reporting to the board that those have been closed out? Because some of them are ones that, you know, I think we certainly need assurance that vehicle use and some of the school-specific, I mean, if you think it's a serious cash management problem, we need to be assured that it's not a problem anymore. So how does the information flow back to us?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And it's our plan for the upcoming year. We've added additional hours to follow up. Right now, we've taken a really great step in that making sure all of the reports that we issue with recommendations that management is responding, or the appropriate people are responding to those and coming up with remediation. And when we go back into those areas, we're following up on those. But for those, our plan for the upcoming years, any of those that are considered serious, any of those that are red, we're going to go back there specifically to double check to make sure that they've done what they said they were going to do. So for example, in the seclusion and restraints, we're going to go specifically and make sure the recommendations that were provided, the plans that management put in place, that those are in fact in place. And so we're going to track those. And so when we meet with the board, we will, in the summary, we can provide, here are the ones where we had serious findings, and verify that we went back and those were closed out or remediated appropriately.
So do you have a kind of an inventory management tool? I mean, the stuff that we're probably both familiar with would be a significant deficiency. That's that, right. You know, how many of them are there and when are they cleared up? That's correct.
We keep track of all the findings and recommendations, and so we will have, again, all of those that are considered a significant deficiency or a serious matter. We will, right now we're saying within the year, we will make sure to go back and make sure, but it really depends on what the finding is and what the plan of remediation is. Sometimes we may go in quicker, sometimes a little bit longer, but we will provide to the board a regular update of that inventory. Here are the ones that are significant, and whether we went back and whether they've been closed out or not.
Okay, are you on a quarterly reporting schedule now, or how do we have a regular schedule of having it in front of us?
Twice a year.
Twice a year, okay. All right.
Kind of mid-year and then at the end of the year.
All right, so great. Okay, anything else for the prior year? Okay, let's then move to the, to your plan for the coming year.
So for the plan for the coming year, again, this is a risk-based plan. We updated our risk assessment from the prior year. In the prior year, we spent a significant amount of time interviewing people, going through and coming up with the risk-based plan. This year, we did an update of that, and really the significant risks did not change greatly, but some of the key changes in our plan this year compared to what we did last year, first of all, is related to the student behavior support system audits. We have, our plan right now calls for doing an audit of the restraint and seclusion 2015-16 information that's being submitted. We're in the middle of that right now. We're going to go back and verify that management's responses have been followed up on, and then our plan is to look at the process and documentation and reporting of bullying matters, and then suspensions and bus referrals. So that's one of the things that has obviously been a more significant risk that we're going to focus in on this year. We also have added, when we go out to the schools, to look at fundraisers and booster activities based on the special audits that have come in. We've noted that a significant amount of those relate to booster activities and fundraising activities, so we're going to look at those specifically at the schools this year. And then last year we looked at some of the human resource. Instead of looking at human resources this year, we're going to look at the budgeting process. And then we've reduced the number of lunchroom audits. We're only going to do about 20 lunchroom audits because we think there's less risk there. And we have added 190 hours related to the remediation of significant deficiencies. To your point, Chair Jones, we've got time allocated to go back and specifically follow up on those. And just like last year, we do have about 900 hours allocated for special audits and requests. And if there are any significant changes in the plan, we will make sure to report back to the board and seek your approval on those. And I do want to point out that the budget for Dean Dorton, we actually reduced our budget a little bit, so our fees are going to go down a little bit. But we're trying very hard to do this as efficiently as we can and use the internal resources when it makes sense.
Great. Thank you. Are there questions about the plan for the coming year? I guess, yeah, let me just amplify Ms. Horn's question about, I mean, I would summarize it as how are you identifying risks of additional data integrity problems? I mean, you've got some of them identified, but we're very tired of being surprised. I think I can summarize it, and anything you can do to get in front of it would be great.
Okay. Well, we can definitely dedicate some time. I won't say to audit, it'll be more of identification. Here are some areas where we might have duplicate systems or different systems being used, and so we will put that on the list to identify those, and once those are identified, then we can circle back with the board and determine what audit procedures need to be done around those.
Okay. Steph, you want to follow up more? No, okay. Yeah, I think that's. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you. We appreciate your work, and I do feel like there's been a ton of progress in the internal audit capacities of the district, and we thank you for taking the lead in that. And Cordelia and Tom, thank you for working to make this much stronger part of what we're doing. Great. Okay. Thank you. Okay, is there a motion to accept the internal audit results and approve the going forward internal audit plan? Steph moves. Okay, Linda seconds. All in favor? Unanimously adopted. Thank you very much. We're now moving on to the second action item, which is the recommended approval of the Student Support and Behavior Intervention Handbook and the Student Bill of Rights for the 2016-17 school year. Dr. Hargens, would you like to introduce it?
You actually have
Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
speakers.
There are, before we do that, there are 5 speakers on this topic, this agenda item. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board. At the end of 2.5, the bell will ring once, and at the end of the 3rd minute, it will ring twice. The first speaker is Lawrence Wilbon. Mr. Wilbon, thank you for being with us tonight. As I said, you got 3 minutes, and you may begin when ready.
And I probably won't need all 3 minutes, but
Right.
I just want to take the opportunity and address you all today. Good evening. My name is Lawrence Wilbon. I am representing the Louisville Urban League on this evening, and also a parent here with 2 JCPS children that attend Stouffer Elementary. And, you know, when I began to start thinking about the code of conduct and the work that's been done, you know, safety is so important to everyone in this room. But I would also say that to make sure the students are in the classroom, ready to learn, to thrive, is just more important. And so as a concerned parent and as a youth advocate here in the city, I would just encourage and continue to implore you all to consider the removal of the disruptive, deliberate disruption piece within the code of conduct. When I look at some of the data, and I've had conversations with individuals, the individuals that are mostly impacted are a lot of individuals that I work with in the work that we do through the Louisville Urban League. And so I would just strongly encourage you all to consider that as you all vote on the code of conduct this evening. Additionally, I would also encourage you all to consider stricter monitoring of the code of conduct within the schools and to ensure that there's consistency across the board as a code of conduct is being used within the schools. There are some disparities across the board where one school or one child may receive a certain kind of punishment, if you will, versus another. And I would just encourage you all to continue to monitor that closely to ensure that all students within JCPS are able to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, that's great. No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for your comments. Our next speaker is Tom Moffatt. Mr. Moffatt, you've been with us to speak many times, so thank you for being with us again this evening. And you may begin when ready.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, Dr. Hargens, and board members. The changes in the code that I understand are being presented tonight seem a good step forward. I'm here tonight to remind you that they will not be enough to make a dent in the problem without an intensive school-wide effort to change relationships in the classroom for the better. I was excited and somewhat hopeful a few months ago when I learned that David Jones had suggested setting aside $10 million in next year's budget, as I understand it, for restorative justice. Even though that was soon cut back to $5 million, I continued to see important progress when I learned that Clout understood the money would set up an effective pilot program in over 10 schools. To top it off, I heard that training would be whole school and done by an outside group with experienced trainers and a successful track record. Now I'm hearing that the money will not all go to restorative justice, and there is no firm commitment to such an extensive pilot program. If that is correct, that is a huge disappointment to me. It comes after 40 years that I know of no real significant progress on these issues as far as the students are concerned. Please do whatever it takes to get that program back on track with at least $5 million in the coming school year. I'm convinced that the results would bring JCPS many more millions of dollars worth of Metro Louisville support from parents, citizens, and businesses for the years to come. I just know that would happen if we substantially improve and reduce the disruptive behavior in the classrooms. Just do it.
Thank you, Mr. Moffatt. Our next speaker is Rashad Abdul Rahman, sorry. Feel free to correct me. Thank you for being with us this evening. Close, right? All right, you have 3 minutes, 1 bell after 2.5, and 2 after 3, and please begin when ready.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it. So, good evening, JCPS board members. My name is Rashad Abdul Rahman, so you were very close, you were in the ballpark. I am the director of the Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods. I want to start by acknowledging that our teachers... Sorry, okay. Let me see if I can fix this. All right. Is that better? We good? All right. So I first want to acknowledge that our teachers do a tremendous and challenging job educating our children. I am grateful to the people who are called to education and answer that calling with the full knowledge of the sacrifices it takes to do it well. In many ways, this is a defining moment for JCPS. This is an opportunity to lead the country in terms of what it means to be a compassionate, data-driven, and equitable school district. The strategic plan for JCPS is subtitled Excellence with Equity. It highlights the importance of equitable access, outcomes, and valuing diversity. We know that we have a long way to go on this journey, but part of that journey is to boldly and courageously address areas in our school system where racial disparity and disproportionality continue to negatively impact the lives of far too many children of color. We have relied for too long on murky, subjective disciplinary categories, like deliberate disruption, to remove children from classrooms at racially disproportionate rates when peer districts across the country have long ceased this misguided practice. We have ignored the reality that suspension is a proven, ineffective discipline strategy that, when used, actually increases the likelihood that youth will engage in antisocial behavior. Too many of us have bought into the fantasy that suspension is somehow a useful form of engagement. We all want a safe classroom environment for all of our teachers and students. This is non-negotiable. In addition to safety, we must be concerned with identifying engagement opportunities that build partnerships with family, not adversity. All of our children deserve first and fair chances to learn. They deserve a code of conduct that is evidence-based and inclusive, rather than subjective and exclusive. They deserve a system of discipline that is fair and responsive to developing the content of their character, and not responsive to the color of their skin. Brown versus Board is a salient example that equity must be legislated in order for it to become a norm. Before you now is an opportunity to further that rich tradition. Now is not the time for divisive fear-mongering and irresponsible hyperbole about lawless schools where students have no consequences. Now is the time to lean into the data, apply practices that are evaluated and proven, and lead the country with the best school system imaginable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Barbara Boyd. Barbara Boyd. Ms. Boyd, thank you for being here. You will also have 3 minutes, with 1 bell after 2.5 and 2 after 3.
I didn't think I was going to speak, but hello, everyone. My name is Barbara Boyd. I'm a retired Jefferson County public school teacher, and I also chair an organization called the Kentucky Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. I attended the second work session, and I was concerned about some of the things that I heard. I want to reiterate that I agree with everything the speakers before me said. And in addition, I want to urge you to hold off on approving the Student Code of Conduct for some of the following reasons. 1, lack of consistency for short-term and 6 to 10 day suspensions. And I heard Ms. Porter mention that several times when when you were going over the corrections or additions or amendments to the Student Code of Conduct. Number 2, in no circumstance should a kindergartner be suspended for failure to provide information. The goal is to keep the students in the classroom. 3, the Student Code of Conduct allows students to be suspended subjectively. 4, the lack of time to train administrators and teachers appropriately to the plan is there's not enough time. School starts in 14 days. And with that being said, it's apparent that a great deal of work still needs to be done. It's not ready. And I urge you to vote, to delay voting to approve the Student Code of Conduct.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. Our last speaker on this topic is Chris Harmar. Mr. Harmar, thank you for being with us tonight. And you've been here before, you know about the 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Chris Harmar. I represent the Louisville chapter of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, which has about 1,500 households in Jefferson County. I'm here to ask you to accept the version of the Code of Acceptable Behavior, the handbook as modified during the work session, with the proviso that there's prior assurance that there will be another review process next spring. I think we all understand that there were mixed messages in the Handbook Review Committee this year. I am deeply appreciative of the work that's been done in the last couple months. It is a vast improvement over the document last year, but as the previous speakers have eloquently said, it still contains the fundamental issues of the possibility of disproportionate use of out-of-school suspensions in particular, and we want to be evidence-based. We know that's where we can't go. So as a Quaker, I will say these friends have spoken my mind and let that go. The other piece, though, that I do want to raise is this document is very, while it's much clearer in the reactive consequences portion of the document, it is still a very aspirational document on the proactive side. I'm glad that information's in there, don't get me wrong at all, and those are incredible new initiatives and things that we want to see all over the place. But if a teacher or a parent reads that, or a student reads that, they're going to say, oh, this is probably what I need. I'm struggling with the way things are going now. The only way to have those things available to each of those teachers, therefore schools, therefore parents, is to have funding for that. And I urge both Assistant Superintendent Seitz and the administration to work on coming up with funding presentations for the board in August so that we have adequate funding so that schools can access any one of the programs like trauma-informed care or compassionate schools or restorative practices. To dangle those out there without being able to deliver them, the document is incomplete, and I certainly hope and we'll be back pressing you for that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harmar. Dr. Hargens, do you want to introduce Dr. Seitz? Or?
Yes, I would. Thank you. So we have been on a journey of continuous improvement, and so tonight we're bringing the board the Student Support and Behavior Intervention Handbook. Its focus is on proactive supports to help students meet high behavioral expectations. So what we did is presented clear and consistent expectations, and there will be an implementation process and a monitoring of the data that we will report regularly to the board. I'm confident that the right people are in place to monitor its implementation and that we are on a journey of continuous improvement. And we did verify and say that this will be a process where we will continuously revise and we will do a revision based on the implementation. Dr. Seitz is the area superintendent whose responsibility is the implementation and the behavioral support system. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Seitz to present the handbook.
Thank you, Dr. Hargens. Chair Jones, board members, thank you for having me. The first thing I want to do, and I did this in the work session, but we have a broader audience again, and I want to make sure that I talk a little bit about all of the folks that have been involved in the process to make this happen this year. Prior to Dr. Hargens making the commitment to kind of restructure and give the dedication and the staffing and the time to really get this right and look at our systems and make sure that what we're doing is moving forward the correct things to do, we had a very, very good group of folks working on these things. There was a committee in place prior to the reorganization that spent significant time, what I would call mobilizing, and really trying to dig into some institutional norms that they wanted to shift, one of those being the disruptive or the deliberate disruption piece. And to those speakers that did mention it, they can be satisfied that they did research what some of the very common uses of that particular code were, and then tried to break that code down into things that we might be able to better track and offer supports for and better monitor the use of, and whether that's happening in a way that we think is consistent across the district to kind of demystify the whole topic of deliberate disruption. That was something that Dr. Marshall's committee and team did work on. The other thing that they worked on that has also been mentioned and I think affirmed, may still need some more work as we move forward this year towards our new version that will be coming out for next school year, which is 17-18, so not this coming, but the next one, always looking forward, but is the age appropriateness and developmental appropriateness piece of that, the language around that, breaking up age groups and age ranges in a way that we think is intelligent around making sure that we're supporting kids in a way that is accurate and protecting instructional time. With that said, another thing that Dr. Marshall's group also worked on was the new leveling language and making sure that we understand progressive discipline in a more sophisticated way. Further teams that I'll describe in a moment have done more work with that language, but really making sure that we think about things in what are all the proactive strategies we have. Those are all discussed, classroom and school-wide expectations before we even get to discipline with students are talked about, strategies are listed, because we do want to start to have the discussion of how do we protect instructional time, something that Ms. Porter has mentioned over and over again, and many board members and the community. We want to make sure we do our best to keep a safe environment, but also keep students in the classroom, because we know that that's where they learn and that's where our teachers can positively impact them. So that is something that Dr. Marshall's team worked on. And I would say finally, I do think that we need to consider the work that was then done by a smaller group that took all of the feedback from the different forums that were held in the community, again, prior to the reorganization, prior to the work session in June, and looked at all the feedback that was given, and they tried to go through and make additions, tried to write that language around the proactive strategies and make those additions. And then at that time, we kind of turned that over to board member feedback once that version was posted. Then obviously we had the work session, we got more feedback. Then it went through the new behavior support teams, and in that work session I described those teams. Those teams were convened, those folks were invited, and many did participate, and we got really positive feedback and suggestions from them to help solve some of the problems that we needed to solve from the work session. We knew we had to solve it. How are we going to do that and get agreement around that? And I think that really worked well for us, and again, that kind of resulted in some things I discussed tonight. Change in language about making sure our families understand progressive discipline. Does that mean we have to go in that lockstep sequential way? That's the best way if we can, but if we can't and we have a really urgent issue, we also understand that our families and our administrators know they may have to move to a more significant consequence or response as a result of severity, and they're able to do that. The positive thing, and I hope it reassures our speakers tonight and our board, we will be monitoring these things, and we will be looking at narrative, we'll be looking at the use of codes, and what are people doing with those pages that we're going to hopefully approve tonight to support our students or not, and make sure that that's happening equitably, and that we're really having the crucial conversations that we need to have, that we're looking at supports we may need to put into schools that don't have the resources they need to properly provide some of those supports, and that we're providing training and support to schools that may recognize there's an issue and not know how to solve it on their own. So that's really important to us. So those are things that we've done. Again, I would like to give recognition to all of the folks that are not only part of Dr. Marshall's committee, but that writing team of his that was convened, and the behavior support team work that's happened since that time. And of course, I appreciate all the community feedback and board member feedback, and hopefully you felt like your concerns were heard and hopefully entertained, and we did the best we could to, for any of your constituents' concerns, address those, but also stay within what we feel like the experts and the people that have been partnering with us feel is best for our students and for our schools. So with that said, this evening in the work session we did look at, you all have a paper version of these in front of you, and it's titled Amendments to the 2016-17 Student Support and Behavior Intervention Handbook. These are the exact, I believe, the exact representations of what we did in the work session tonight. I encourage you to just briefly skim the page. I'm going to go through each item. I'm not going to read the entire tobacco piece, but I want to make sure I kind of give a snapshot. You have the actual verbiage when it's necessary. So let's start page 12. We wanted to add parents are to provide a working phone number in order for schools to effectively communicate with families. That will be under the parent guardian conference piece on page 12. It may shift to page 13. If you notice, that's at the very end of the page, but I think you'll work with us on that flexibility. Page 37, we are going to change. That is exactly how it's going to appear. So we did add the JCPS as a tobacco-free district. We wanted that language to be there. But Board Member Brady, you'll see that all those things that you would ask questions about in the work session are there. And notice the consequences, Board Member Horn, are reflected and corrected, so it does say will result. And we did add the things that apply to level 2. So you'll see detention and out-of-school suspension as an and/or. So schools can choose to use that or just do the confiscation, parent contact, et cetera. That flexibility was already included in the levels, but I just wanted to make sure that you saw that to make that consistent with the format of the rest of the code. You'll see that the whole document, we're going to do our best to remove that language that we discussed of success pathway and restorative pathway to the alternative placement language that we have seen prior, and that matches in the definitions of the behaviors in the current code that you've reviewed. Pages 12 through 15, we are going to change that to rights and responsibilities, and that is all as a result of our work session. So you will receive an updated version to review to make sure that we were militant to the requests that we have said that we would put in place if there is an approval this evening. And obviously, that's pretty much all we have at this time.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Seitz. Questions or comments? I think Ms. Porter.
Thank you for coming to us a couple of times with the work session. Thank you for the presentations. Thank you for the opportunity to put people in the room to have this discussion. I have lost sleep about this because it's important. And I have some things to say that I just need to say for the good of why I'm here. Because, and I'm still walking under the cloud of Muhammad Ali, so I'm going to talk about what's great, because we have the potential to be the greatest school district. But we have to keep working to be great, and we have to want to be great collectively, not one at a time. So one of the things I say to myself is, why am I here? Why am I sitting in this chair? This is a governance body, and we're here to provide information and to advocate and represent. And I represent really strongly for academic needs for our students, all students, and those that need special help. I talk about that a lot, which you probably get tired of, but that's okay. I'm not going to stop. One of the things that we're doing is we're supporting change. We've asked for change, and that's what we're doing, and it's a hard process. We have allocated $5 million to make the process work. The first time that we've done that, I've been on the board. This is my second term. This is the first time that I've heard Dr. Hargens go back and say $5 million to make this happen. So that's huge. And I am thinking that because you're sitting there before us, that you support what you're bringing to us. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. And Dr. Hargens, because you're sitting here with us, I just want to make sure, because people say to us, where is Dr. Hargens? So what we want to know is that you support it. So thank you for that. At the last work session, Katie, I asked you several questions really quickly, and I'm going to go over those really quickly. Yes, we're concerned about the safety of our children. Yes, we're concerned about the safety of our staff. And discipline is not being thrown out the door. Those are the things that you said to us last time, because there was a lot of conversation about were we taking care of children, were we taking care of staff, and we were getting rid of discipline. We're not doing any of those things. I had an opportunity to listen to part of a tape of some voices of male students in the district, and I alluded to this in the work session about inconsistent treatment. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to continue to talk about inconsistent treatment when we have, we give people the opportunity to make decisions, but they're not consistent decisions. And because I do something, I may be suspended, and because David Jones does something, he may get to come back to school the next day. That is absolutely unacceptable, and we have got to, I don't know how you monitor that, but we collectively as a community are going to watch that, because it needs to stop, because it's about equity and fairness for kids. I had an opportunity to hear President Obama as he had his town hall on race, and he said the schools have to be right, and I agree with him. Jefferson County Public Schools have to be right, and we as a district have the ability to make them right collectively. Today, I had an opportunity to be in an event for the Fund for the Arts, and I heard the wonderful performance of one of our teachers, who's an elementary teacher, but he's also an artist and a musician. And he gave a presentation. In his presentation, he talked about his concerns for the community, arresting our students not finishing school. But then he talked about every day he looks into the faces of accomplishment. Those are our students. And that's how I view our students. Some of the schools call them our scholars, but it's extremely important to me. He talked about West Louisville. So I had an opportunity to hear Loretta Lynch. And I'm going to tell the story quickly about the bumblebee. If you look at the bumblebee, the anatomy of the bumblebee says it cannot fly, but it does fly. As we look at our students, we should not assume what they cannot do. We should talk about what they can do. And as we continue to say what they cannot do, that's not acceptable, because along life's road, people have said to us all what we cannot do. So I would encourage us to think about the bumblebee as we move forward. And as soon as I can find one, I will be wearing one, because she has one as well. So I go back to what I said before. Why am I here? I'm here to make every day count for our students and to advocate and to speak for others. We have no students to lose in this district. Being in school is important. I understand behavior, that's important, but there's no pain like losing a student or a child. So I ask us to do it right. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Porter. Other comments, questions? Lisa?
Nobody wants to follow Ms. Porter after that. Thank you for your wisdom and your heart. So I want to say, first of all, the ways that this document has vastly improved since the last time we saw it. The language around seclusion and restraint is so much better, so much clearer. So thank you for that. Thank you for including culturally relevant instruction, cultural identity as part of the proactive measures, because if we're talking about engaging students, we need to be talking to them, teaching them in ways that make sense to them and who they are as individuals. So that was a huge, huge piece. The inclusion of proactive approaches in general, enormous shift from the document we approved a year ago. The developmental appropriateness, including that language in there, was also making huge strides. This was also just a much clearer and more holistic revision. I think in terms of the discrepancies, the disparities, there's much more clarity now about those categories. That deliberate disruption has been broken down into several different categories, and I think all of that is huge improvement. So thank you to all of the folks who've been involved in that. I know it's been a tremendous effort. A little bit of a sticking point for me, and I brought it up in the work session, but we didn't have time to really dive into it, is in terms of developmental appropriateness. In this document, we have as an option to exclude very young students from school for things like failure to respond to questions or requests, false information to staff. And so given that we've just made some revisions in the last hour or so, I wonder if you think that that would be a good idea to maybe make clear that, I'm going to come at this another way. What would be the rationale? Why would we include a pre-kindergarten or a kindergarten, a first, second, third grade student? Why would we exclude a child from class for a failure to respond to questions or requests, or providing false information to staff? Does that really rise to the level of saying you don't belong in this classroom?
And I'm going to defer to Karen Branham. Do you want to chime in again? Since you were the individual that was with us for the work session, do you want to answer that for her?
I'll be honest, our focus at the request of Dr. Hargens was to provide some guidance on where we would draw that line, what is behaviorally appropriate in terms of a more severe consequence versus a less severe consequence. Do we draw that line at a K through 3 spectrum or a K through 2? What we found in research was that we would look at a K through 3, so that would support what you're saying. Why would we remove a child for an example, the examples that you gave at a kindergarten or a first grade level?
So maybe there's room for revising that even on the fly and getting rid of that 3-day suspension for pre-K through 3 for those particular items.
And you're saying failure to respond and the false information piece and the disruptive behavior, and you're saying remove the level 3.
In general, what I had asked for in the presentation was some sort of research basis for really all of why these dots are where they are, some sort of best practices. And I understand that this has been a lot of revision in a very short time frame. I know, Dr. Hargens, you've said this is not perfect, and you've also both all committed to this being an ongoing. We're not going to wait 2 years till we see this again. We're going to continue. We're going to have better training. We're going to have better monitoring. We're going to have more proactive measures in place, and we're going to see where there are issues. All of that is correct. Yes,
absolutely.
So we could, go ahead and maybe make those couple of changes, but continue. If we're excluding children from class, there needs to be a really compelling reason. If we're excluding children from class, we just need to see the research behind it.
Lisa, could I make a suggestion? I think technically this is, the document as amended by this has been recommended to the board. I think if you could consider how to formulate your changes into a motion. The one, because I think there are 2 pieces. There are 1 or 2 changes, if I understand you right, that you would like to recommend be made now. And then you also have a longer term ask for additional research, demonstration and explanation, but also a more age appropriate or developmentally appropriate code for the very young years, which will have to be done over the longer term. So if you could consider that, and we'll come back and let other people make their comments.
Thank you, David.
Then we'll come, that'll be a way to get it into a decision mode. So who else has a comment? Chris, and sorry, then Linda.
2 things. One, I do also have a motion I wish to make. So when we get to that part of the program, just let me know.
Why don't we, so let's assume that Lisa will make a motion and Chris may decide to suggest an amendment that would let you add whatever you're proposing.
There might be 2 separate motions, but
we'll sort all that out.
But I do want to make some comments regarding the code of conduct. And first of all, I want to thank you for for shepherding this process through, as well as Dr. Marshall for all the work that he did, as well as all the volunteers and the community members who worked so hard within those groups, and also the community members that spent time to come in and also give us feedback, and students as well. As a board member, I have gotten more contact and more email concerns expressed about the code of conduct than I have any other single issue ever. This process and this code of conduct that you see before you is not the original document by any means. Am I safe to assume that the deliberate disruption aspect of that has basically been gone?
It's gone. There is no such behavior listed or defined in the code.
Thank you. So that is a perfect example of how this administration and how the school district has responded and listened to the community feedback. One of the speakers that spoke to us earlier today, he came into one of the superintendent summits, and he made a very good point. Regarding deliberate disruption, it's like, okay, that's a very broad topic. So if you go into a hospital, you're not going to say, oh, your diagnosis is you're sick, because there's no, how do you approach that? How do you attack that? So what we've done here is we've actually created a much more specific diagnosis list of things to deal with. And now we can track that. We can find how we're going to respond to that, and also get some numbers and some real numbers on that. And it's also not this nebulistic thing that's out there that invites itself up to the type of inherent bias or unconscious bias that has also been expressed up here. And that's a very real issue, not just within our district, but across our country as well. But I also want to compliment the other folks that have really done some work on this, and also the Jefferson County Teachers Association, because they sent out an email earlier this week supporting this document, and also getting that information out to our teachers. So there's a little bit less anxiety about this going into our school year. So I do want to say some good positive, good communication regarding that. And again, just express my thanks and appreciation for all the hard work and for the revisions that have gone into this. So thank you very much.
Linda?
Well, I also wanted to thank you, Katie, for your leadership in this, and for your listening ear to this. You know, when I first heard the recommendations the first time, there were many instances that were alarming to me that I was reading, where suspension was not an option for some very serious level offenses. And while we talk about a student not following somebody's request, if you're a bus driver and you can't get a child to sit down, and that is a problem on that bus, you see, there are levels of seriousness within each one of these categories. And my concern before was that we cut it off at level 1 and level 2, and just said, oh, well, no matter how serious this is, we're going to stop at level 2. But fortunately, we have been able to go on and integrate discretion, administrative discretion, back into the code of conduct, so that when there are those serious situations that pop up, that happen, and they're not everyday events, but sometimes they do happen, we have the tools for the administrator to go to the level that he or she needs to go to. So that, to me, assures me that we can handle the serious situations in the way that they need to be handled. And also, you know, we've got to quit thinking that restorative practices is going to be the savior of everything in the schools in terms of discipline. If you read, I mean, this school board journal I just received, an article concerning keeping the peace, is about a school district in Texas that relies on restorative practices, has put it in place, is proud of its implementation, has experienced reduced suspensions, is experiencing reduced offenses. And by the way, the monitoring of this particular code of conduct that we have is going to be, I think, its great strength, because it's going to break offenses down into specifics so that we can track declines, we can track trends upward, and I think that's going to be a huge strength for this. But in this district, after a whole article of explaining how they've achieved the things that they've achieved under restorative practices, the principal in there says, as is common with other districts that rely on restorative practices, Fort Bend continues to use suspensions and expulsions as it sees fit. There are some behaviors, our writing is so bad, there are some behaviors that need assertive and immediate consequences. We have to keep that in mind. I mean, we want to be able to restore where we can, but we cannot substitute all of our discipline for restorative practices. We hope that it's, you know, we're going to keep order in our buildings, and this code that we have right now, which has a brand new name, which I love because it's much more descriptive of what we're doing than the code of acceptable behavior that always talked about all the unacceptable things. But the name is so much better, and I hope also in this we will monitor the positive things that we're doing. You know, this is about proactive things. So I hope we can monitor some of those proactive things that we're doing, as well as the offenses that are going on, so that it will match the tone of the title. But I'm very, very optimistic about this, because it has restored discretion for the serious offenses that do occur, and I appreciate very much the work that's been done on here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Steph?
Thank you to Dr. Marshall for starting this off. Really appreciate it. And to Dr. Zeitz for leading the effort also. So thank you. I think that we've got a lot of feedback. I'm really hopeful, because we had to do something, and I think that we've done something that hopefully will be a positive. I'm very also interested in this robust monitoring, and particularly, I know that we're going to be trying to look at all the different schools. They all have to follow the same code of conduct,
Yes.
correct?
They can have local school rules, but they can't change what is existing. So they might have a dress code, they might have a tardy policy, but they can't do different things with the behaviors listed in the code than what the code says. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then because we have different types of schools, like we have Montessori schools, we have traditional schools, we have regular schools. So what is the differences, like how will the monitoring be, I guess, nuanced when you have, a traditional school, which, one of the 3 tenets would be behavior, that's a strength, and that's what makes traditional school, it's lifted up as one of the things. How does that all, if we have one code of conduct, how does the nuance, how does that work when we monitor?
Well, actually, it's interesting that you'd ask that, because I thought that question was going to come up at the work session, the first work session in June. And I polled all of the traditional school, middle and high school, but I focused mostly on high school, suspension data, just to see how are they using the code, is it similar? And honestly, they're not using the code any differently. There were not any suspensions in there for things that one might assume, like a dress code infraction or those things really aren't happening. Typically, the suspensions that were there were for things that you would assume they would be for fighting or other types of aggressive behavior. And I can bring that data back to the board. I think that it's one of those things that if necessary, obviously there's great discretion in the code. So there might be times they might want to move faster through the progression than a school in a different situation. And those are trends that we're going to have to look at. The issue is going to be, however, if they continue to have to hit these high levels for infractions that really don't always demand that in a regular situation, kind of what are we doing there, and is that really what we need to be doing? But I will say, I don't even foresee that being a serious issue, because I wanted to know right now, based on last year's data, how did traditional schools use suspension, and how different was it than anybody else would use suspension? And really, I was pleasantly surprised that, not really surprised, but pleasantly confirmed that there wasn't anything there that I thought was much different than what, again, your garden variety A1 school would do. So, does that answer your question? Okay.
Okay. Chuck, you have anything? No? Okay. I've got just one other comment. I think that our community partners and public speakers said an awful lot of the things that I agree with, and my colleagues on the board have covered almost all of the rest of it. The one thing I want to just point out from my perspective is I appreciate the process that we just went through on this. I echo the thanks to Dr. Marshall, to all the different people. This has been really hard, but it has been hard because the issue is hard. The district has an injunction from this board to do several things that don't fit together automatically. One is to have orderly classrooms where learning can occur. 2 is to dramatically reduce differential application of whatever is causing differential outcomes in the discipline policy. And the 3rd is to keep kids in school as much as possible so that more learning can occur. And all of that, someone else said very wisely, that requires change. And in order to figure out how to do this, we have to create space to throw stuff up on the wall, to discuss what the real problems are, to argue passionately about things. You know, I mean, there's no big urban district in America that has figured any of this stuff out. There are pockets and there are schools. But I want to compliment the people on having the fortitude to work through this to get to better, not perfect, but better. And that gives me more confidence that looking forward, we will continue to be able to get to better. And Dr. Hargens, I include you in that, in that thanks. With that, what I would suggest, I think this is going to work, although Frank, I may need your assistance. I'm going to suggest that Lisa make her motion. Chris, I think you may then be able to have an amendment on it. We'll then be able to vote on your amendment, and then Lisa's motion, and if neither of those passes, then we'll go back to probably a move to just do it as has been recommended by Katie and Donna. Is that all right?
Point of clarification, my amendment has nothing to do with Lisa's, so I'm not amending Lisa's. I would be a separate motion. She'll make a motion, and then I have a separate motion.
Okay, fine. So, Lisa.
Okay, so we'll give this a try. So on page 23, I make a motion to remove level 3 from failure to respond to questions or requests, and to remove level 3 from false information to staff.
Oh, that's because my microphone isn't on. Sorry, guys. Right, so the motion is on page 23 to remove level 3 from failure to respond to questions or requests, and to remove level 3 from false information to staff.
For which?
And this is
for the pre-K through 5.
for pre-K
yes.
through 5, correct.
So she's only referring, Ms. Duncan, to the pre-K through 5 age group for that removal of dots.
That was on page 20.
Yes.
That was on 23
Page 23.
only. Okay.
Page 23 only.
All right. And Frank, is it appropriate to have a second for that now and then to go to the next?
It would be appropriate to vote on that and then have Mr. Brady make his motion, and then if they both pass, then vote on the amended document.
Okay, so is there a second to Dr. Wilner's motion? Okay, Steph seconds. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, 6-1 with Ms. Duncan opposing. Mr. Brady.
Yes, my amendment has to do with the section of drug/alcohol distribution. I would like to include the products of tobacco products as well as electronic cigarettes to that description, because I feel that those are equally, if not even more so, problematic and dangerous to our students. So my motion will read, I'd like to make a motion to amend drug/alcohol distribution sections to include tobacco and electronic cigarettes. These sections are located on pages 24, 26, and 35 of the document as presented to us currently, and that would be my motion.
Can I ask a point of clarification?
Sure.
Would it work for you if in the descriptor we refer back to the formal definitions, meaning we list them with those titles, but we don't relist again those broad definitions? Can we cite them back to the first place that we define them, whichever one comes first alphabetically?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure just for brevity and simplicity.
As far as, now, my motion still relates to this, but just as a point of clarification, it could be simply where the title is actually drug/alcohol distribution. It could be drug/alcohol/tobacco/electronic cigarettes.
Distribution.
Gotcha. Yes.
Okay. And for definitions, we can just say refer to whatever.
That's correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So is there a second for that motion?
I think I need to hear it again.
Okay. Thanks.
Do you want Mr.
Katie,
Brady
actually,
to?
why don't you repeat it just to make sure that
What he is proposing is that for distribution purposes, so for a student to be selling or giving to other students, he wants to include electronic cigarettes and tobacco products in that language, so that if I'm giving students e-cigarettes, or if I'm giving them e-cigarette paraphernalia that they might be putting drugs into, which is possible, or I'm giving a student packs of cigarettes at school, that I can basically be disciplined underneath the distribution category if I'm truly distributing. Is that a good?
It is.
Okay.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, Chuck seconds. Is there any discussion? Steph?
Katie, I just would like to know what did the committee, did you guys discuss this at all, or do you have any opinions?
They did not discuss it separate than, tobacco was discussed in your more traditional smoking on school grounds or being in possession of cigarettes or e-cigarettes or tobacco or any of that stuff. To my knowledge, now we would have to ask Dr. Marshall, and we can, that prior to my participation, did they discuss tobacco products in the vein of drug and alcohol possession or distribution? No. Okay.
What do you guys think? You're the experts.
We are the experts.
Yeah.
On tobacco and e-cigarettes. No, I'm joking. I don't use either one. I think this is one of those cases where, again, the appropriate thing's probably going to happen either way. I don't think that we're seeing as big of an issue with students distributing tobacco products to other students during the school day. What I think we see with distribution are things like controlled substances. My understanding from board member Brady is that he's more worried about students using paraphernalia for illegal purposes. Would I be correct in that?
No.
Okay.
I am concerned about tobacco use among students because tobacco is far more addictive than it would be alcohol. So to me, tobacco and electronic cigarettes and those types of products seem to be more of a threat to human health than alcohol would, but yet alcohol is part of the distribution process. And I will also point in a point of clarification that at the beginning of the school year last year, there were 5 students that were hospitalized out of Meade County High School that had passed out because an electronic cigarette had been passed around. So there was no illegal substance particularly within that. It was some type of substance, but there didn't fall under an illegal classification to my knowledge. But all 5 of those students had to be rushed to Kosar Children's Hospital to find out what was going on with them. This is an ongoing problem that we are seeing within our schools, and I think that it rises to the level of a serious issue, especially if you're dealing with not just having these products on our school campuses, but also if you're going to distribute or pass these products around to other students.
I think this is another thing too, Board Member Horn, that we can monitor. So if we make this addition, this is something that we can look at. And if we, moving forward, determine that it's a new trend and something that we're really having aggressive issues with, we'll create more programming to support our students with tobacco cessation. We already have programs in place and plan to increase those. So I think this will fit in with those initiatives.
I agree with Dr. Zeitz. If you put it in there and nobody ever does it,
no problem.
It's in there, no problem.
No harm
and
done.
If it happens a lot, we'll monitor the data and tell you that it is happening a lot. So there's no harm to put it in there, because in order to use it, you'd have to have it happen. So yeah.
So are you saying you're supportive?
Yes.
of
Yes.
that?
Yes.
You're not concerned about having teachers have an additional, just getting stretched too thin to patrol something that is, as far as I know, been a forever problem in schools?
Well, we're talking about distribution, so
And
we're
a
not talking
referral.
about them having it. We're talking about them distributing it or selling it to other kids. So, or students, that's a vast difference. Do we think, are people going to be patrolling? We have rules and regulations in there regarding if I have a pack of cigarettes or an electronic cigarette in my backpack.
Okay.
Or I'm caught in the bathroom using one. That is
Okay.
different than me selling it to
Right.
or distributing larger amounts than an individual consume to other people.
Okay, so you two agree?
Yes.
You support the amendment?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? I think that was unanimously pro. Okay, so we have adopted the code with 2 amendments. And Frank, would you like us to now just have a third one, or are we good?
I think you need a motion to adopt the code. You've adopted 2 amendments to the document, but
Okay.
you need to approve it now.
Okay, so I'll move that we adopt the code as recommended, including the 2 amendments and then the third update that was on the sheet of paper that we have. Is there a second? Okay, Chris seconds. All in favor? Passes unanimously. Very good. Okay, thank you, Dr. Zeitz, and thank you, Dr. Marshall, and everybody else who's been involved in this process, and we look forward to better. Okay, it is now no longer 8 o'clock, but the board is going to move into executive session. Let me see, I will read the explanatory language. The board will now conduct a closed session as permitted by KRS 61.8101E of the Open Meetings Act for the purpose of a discussion relating to collective bargaining negotiations. Is there a motion? Okay, Steph moves. A second? Lisa seconds. All in favor? Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you very much, and we will be back hopefully in a half an hour, certainly within an hour.